All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karen Williams. I am the co-chair of the Portland Utility Board, and this is a community meeting of volunteers that are tasked to advise the City Council on items related to the Portland Water Bureau and the Bureau of Environmental Services. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting, as you just heard, is being recorded. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. PUB believes and acts upon anti-racist principles. In our meeting spaces and interactions with PUB, while every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that's targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there's wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. We put this into action by speaking up and speaking out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning the conduct, but not the person. Amy will go over the meeting guidelines.
Thank you, Karen. My name is Amy Archer Masters, and I'll quickly run through the guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, state the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the hosts, which is the PUB staff, myself, and Eliza. Please limit any chats to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us that you've been waiting to speak if you've not been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. The co-host may lower your hand once you've begun speaking, just to maintain the flow of conversation. During the public comment periods, the public may also raise your hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If you're connecting by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on for the board, presenters, and facilitators when speaking if desired, not required. All others should leave videos off. Microphones, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Members of the public will be muted except when giving public comment. If you're connecting by phone, please press *6 to mute or unmute yourself. As mentioned, public comment will be taken during the public comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with myself or Eliza, or raise your hand during the public comment period. It also will be available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. This meeting is being recorded. Back to you, Karen.
So our agenda for today, having called the meeting to order, we'll have our usual disclosure of communications and see if there's any public comment. And then we're going to go right into business. We'll be allowing a few minutes for questions and discussion around the materials that were sent to the board ahead of time regarding the Water Bureau's debt recovery. We are then going to take a quick look at the letter of support for the Portland Harbor Grant Committee program and make a decision about accepting that and having a spokesperson go and present that at the council meeting. And then we're going to have a discussion and make a decision about our potential upcoming work session with City Council and which direction you all want to go with that. And then we have a couple of items that our fellow members Kale and Robin would like to bring up for discussion with the board. And then we'll take a quick look at what's on the docket for November 18th and we'll adjourn. So with that, are there any disclosures of communications that board members would like to report?
Karen, this is Alex Lopez. Once again, I've got a couple of meetings that I held with the city of Portland. Jessica Terlikowski, I believe Annie Von Berg might have been on one of those as well. Generally, those discussions were limited to Portland Harbor and the Portland Harbor cleanup.
Thank you, Alex. And Tom?
Yes, I called the Water Bureau's water quality line the other day and spoke with one of their experts about lead. I just had some questions, and I just wanted to get it from somebody that was able to give me information, and it was very enlightening. I encourage all the members of the board to, on occasion, maybe call the Water Bureau water quality people, because they really know what it sounds like. They really know what they're doing. And the point about it was regarding lead. And what really was helpful to me was the clarification that, as I mentioned at a previous meeting, I tested the lead in my home. It was 0.11 parts per billion, which is way below all the various numbers we've seen in various presentations, which means that it's that low, at least in the pipes that are near my home. And what this person really helped me understand is that the lead problem is not in the Portland water itself, it's in the homes. And I was reading an article in one of the newspapers that talked about lead entering homes. Lead is already in the homes. It's being facilitated to be released by the fact that the water has a low pH and that type of thing. But anyway, I know we're not going to talk about lead today, so I'll save some of these comments, but that was something I thought I would share. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other disclosures before we move on? All right, thanks very much. Is there any public comment? Members of the public may raise your hand, may unmute, or may put into the chat that you have a comment you'd like to share.
I did not receive any requests to make public comment prior to the meeting.
This is Amy. I did not either.
All right, let's move on then to our business of the day. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes or so to talk amongst ourselves about the information that we were sent regarding various questions and follow-ups that you all, PUB members, had asked at our discussion with the Bureau at the last meeting about the current status of debt recovery. So I'd like to open the floor to anyone who would like to share an observation with your fellow members, get something on the record, and be thinking about if you have any recommendations, given the information that's been shared. Do you have any recommendations for the Water Bureau that you would like PUB to convey?
Hi, Karen, this is Alex Lopez again, voting member. And I just wanted to kind of add a small comment, I guess. I reviewed the document that's the covenants that the city, that the Water Bureau has to abide by. They had previously mentioned those covenants, I think, in response to some questions we had. But it struck me how loose, maybe not loose, but how much or how non-specific those covenants were, and just it just struck me that potentially there were more flexibility than I had originally thought in how the Water Bureau goes about its debt recovery. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Alex. Tom Lipton?
Thank you. Yes, I read the information or questions and answers and et cetera. And a couple of things struck me that I wanted to share. One is that I do think that the Water Bureau does need to take action. Well, Water Bureau and BES, since Water Bureau, I guess, is its agent for BES that does these types of things. But one thing that there was some comments about compassion, and I just wanted to share an experience that happened to my neighbor across the street years ago. She's moved away now, but anyway, it was a woman named Judy. She was elderly, and she really wasn't able to take care of herself, and she was not able to pay her utility bills and various other things. And the Water Bureau had come out, and I guess the Water Bureau, and this is pre-pandemic, so it's a few years ago. But what happened is the Water Bureau was doing its due diligence, and at a particular time, I happened to be looking out the window, and a truck pulled up, and the person got out and started going, working on her meter. And so I went out and I said, what are you doing? And he had tried to knock on the door, and Judy never answered her door for anybody. And at any rate, he was going to turn off her water. And I said, oh, no, you can't turn off her water. And he said, well, we've been through all of these steps and processes and everything, and I have to turn it off. I said, no, please don't turn it off. So he said he couldn't do that. He had to call somebody. And so he called somebody, and I talked to them and told them the situation with Judy. And so I'll just stop there. But the point of it is that I really hope that the Water Bureau can pull in some way as much compassion as it possibly can when it's working with a lot of these people, which I guess is about twice as much. So there used to be, well, anyway, so there's twice as many people now that are in arrears than used to be. And just the fact of cutting off the water and having it happen to some people that just are not able to take care of themselves. Ultimately, the county got involved with Judy, and they helped Judy find a place to live where she was getting assisted living, and she was getting some care because she couldn't just really live on her own. And maybe there aren't too many out there, but that really struck me, that experience that I had personally, and then just somebody mentioning in the discussion about compassion. And there's a sense a little bit, and I don't know if anybody else feels it, but there seems to be a little sense of that there isn't compassion, that it's kind of a nuts and bolts kind of thing, that the Water Bureau doesn't have the ability. And what strikes me as well is that since BES and the Water Bureau are allowed to give financial assistance, doesn't that not comport with these bond covenants that they say they have? How can they give financial assistance and have a program like that and meet their covenants? So I'm just a little confused about that, how they can do it in one particular area. And so how do we shift more of these people into that particular group? And so anyway, those are just some thoughts that I've had about this issue. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Thanks, Tom. And Robin, I'll be with you in just a second, but I do want to make sure that people know that we have City Attorney Karen Moynihan, and from the Office of Management and Finance, I am guessing, Matt Gierach, and please correct my pronunciation, Matt, if I've done that incorrectly. But these are two folks that could respond or answer questions about bond covenant flexibility. For example, that you mentioned, Alex, perhaps your question, Tom, about how does the low income program not conflict with the bond covenants. So if either anyone has particular questions that they would like Matt or Karen to share their thoughts and expertise, please cue that up. And in the meantime, I will go to Robin.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, I think I wanted to jump around a couple places, but my main interest was around the breakdown. I think it was like question 1, the breakdown of commercial versus residential. Yeah, the 2 first paragraphs didn't seem as necessarily as important as just the breakdown of as of October 15th, 2021, and which is the 3rd paragraph in that first question. And I just wanted some more clarification on when you add the 3 numbers of commercial, multifamily, and single family, it comes out to like 20 million. And so I was wondering if we can get more information on that remaining 4 million that is past due. And then that question, I think my question originally kind of is really all of question 1, I think. And that was just also to discuss, or just to say to the board, I was looking at it's page 2 of the response still for that first question. It has a breakdown of like commercial versus multifamily versus single family, showing you that like single families definitely are incurring, or at least have the most accounts that are incurring debt. And I just wanted to try to, I don't know if it's visualize this, but I was thinking about how I live in a multifamily unit. There are 60 apartments within my singular apartment complex. And so when we're looking at those types of numbers, we have to realize how exponentially more people are how multifamily units are impacted by this. And the Water Bureau does not currently have information on people who indirectly pay their water bill. And so there seems to be this like unanswerable question of who are the people who are past due, who absolutely qualify for our low income assistance, but who are excluded from that because they are in multifamily units, which do not directly pay their water bill. Like I wouldn't specifically pay a water bill in my name. I pay it to my landlord, they pay. And so my landlord might be past due, but there seems to be no ability to count how many accounts are actually impacted by that. And I think that was the only thing I really wanted to illustrate, was just like, where's the missing $4 million? That is, I honestly think it's probably just collection fees. But the other thing is, why are the bureaus pushing this 24 million past due, when I believe it was addressed that the bureau is set to receive like around $2 million, and wondering why that isn't, like, why isn't that reducing the number down? It feels like the bureau is, yes, they have to regain this money, but it feels like you're selling me the high number because you want me to really care that this is a huge issue, which it is. But I also want an accurate number that isn't necessarily giving me like bureau politics. Like if the people of Portland owe $24 million, but there is $2 million from federal relief, why is that not immediately penned into that number to make it a reduced number? And that's all I gotta say.
Okay, thanks, Robin. So I'd like to give Cecilia Hune or Director Solmer an opportunity to address the $4 million question. If the number's not quite adding up, would either of you like to elucidate on that point a bit?
Hi, this is Gabe Solmer, Director of the Portland Water Bureau. I think we've got Marcy Reese, our Interim Customer Service Director, on the line. I'm not sure, Marcy, if you got the information you needed to be able to answer that question, but why don't you give it a shot, and then we can always follow up with additional numbers. I know this is a hard way to go back and forth without the real-time conversations, but sometimes we're not sure what the questions are until we get here. So Marcy, anything that you would add on that?
Yeah, I can tell you where the other money is. We've given you kind of our big 3 account classes: the commercial, the residential multifamily, and residential single family. But there are 4 other classes that don't have their water disconnected ever. And those are classifications called reminder and urgent. You'll find accounts like hospitals in those classifications. And then we have our sewer only accounts. One is for owner accounts, one is for tenants, where we are billing for sewer and stormwater services, but their water is provided by another utility, most typically Rockwood PUD. So that's where the other numbers come in.
Thank you very much, Marcy. Appreciate that. Robin, I just want to acknowledge or just say heard your other two very strong points, and I would encourage you to be thinking about how to mold those into some kind of a recommendation for the city to be exploring options for, or looking at finding ways to identify some of these multifamily accounts that we're sure are out there. And we don't know exactly how to find that information, but we can recommend that the city do some more digging and explore other areas to try and get that information. So I just encourage you to be thinking about how to mold those into some kind of a recommendation.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, and let's go to Kale and then Karen Spencer.
Hi there, this is Kale, voting member. Thank you for giving me the floor, Liza. So I want to talk about two things. The covenant. Personally, I think if there's a covenant that is conflicting with what we want to do, I think we can change it, modify it, however, to make it work. If we can amend a constitution because it's no longer applicable, we can do the same thing with the covenant. And I would encourage the Bureau to relook at that and change things so that we are working in a direction that serves its people. And so that's one thing that I want to go. The second thing kind of goes along with what Robin was mentioning. If we can distinguish between the commercial, the residential, the landlord who owes rent, rentals, I think it would be useful if we explore and if we can separate and identify the folks that are more vulnerable. For example, folks that are maybe struggling, have income below the federal poverty level and unable to pay. Maybe we look at, helping them out a bit and resetting their water bill. We visit whether we can determine, how much of those is late fees. If it's late fees, they're not paying for anything other than a penalty. I think during this period, we should always explore anything that is penalizing people. So I'd like to suggest that we look at something like that and a structure where we are going to serve the most vulnerable with the funds that we have and explore helping others if there is remaining, and remove any type of penalties that are making it harder for families.
Thank you, Kale. Karen Spencer, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. So I was a little surprised by the difference between the single family and the commercial accounts. For some reason, I presumed that the commercial account number was going to be much larger than the single family number in total dollars. So that was a real surprise to me about that. Just as a matter of comment. And Tom talked about compassion, and I do collections for my own small business. And there are just some people who will use my service. They'll use $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 worth of my services and then refuse to pay. And unfortunately, it's luckily for us, a very, very small percentage. But every time I have to go through the process with an individual like that, I always come back to fairness and the fairness to the other customers, members of our community. And I'm thinking about the fairness to the folks who have been paying their water bill on time and regularly, or on a payment plan, or making sporadic payments. When you've got such a huge number that is 4+ months over, it becomes unfair to everyone else, because we're either going to have to reduce services, reduce or raise prices in some aspect. And even if it's raising the price 1 penny for everybody else, it does not feel fair. So I respect the decision to begin the collection process. And I hope that in speaking with individual customers, that there is some factor of compassion that is taken into account, but also the fairness to everyone else as well. One question I have, I don't know if it would change my opinion or not, it's just more of a curiosity on this, is what of the accounts that are plus 120 days, what's kind of the mean or the average would, I think, be interesting. Because I know that they're more than 4 months out, but I don't know if like the average person hasn't paid for a whole year, or if they've just not paid for 6 months. So it'd be interesting to know what the mean is. Thank
Marcy,
you.
that's something that you have at your fingertips, or is that something that we could provide and do the analysis on?
Yeah, I think that's something that we could provide. I don't have it at my fingertips right now.
All right, Karen, we can get you that information, or at least our best take on it.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for the logo. I didn't realize I had the wrong background on. Sorry about that.
All right, thanks, Karen Pencer. Robin, can I beg your forgiveness, or not forgiveness, but your graciousness for a moment and go to Gabby, since Gabriella hasn't had a chance to speak yet, and then we'll go back to Robin.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Gabby. Here. I just wanted to recommend, because what I'm hearing is, at least from Tom's comments and Kale's comments and some of the other comments about, how to have or just facilitate the process of folks who are right now currently in debt, and how to, get them onto the low income program. And I want to recommend if the Bureau could explore what that could look like, and how many of those accounts would actually be counted as being part of that program. And that's my recommendation.
All right, thank you, Gabby. Let's go to Robin, and then Amy Chomowitz.
Yeah. I wanted some clarification. Okay, so we have the number of how past due we are, and we have the breakdown of how many accounts in total are in those past due settings. But do we have a total number of accounts serviced by the bureaus, so that we can see what percentage of people are past due? Not specifically who are partaking in the programs to help them get current, but specifically essentially what percentage of the accounts that you service in total are past due, to kind of give us, is this a small percentage? Is this a lot of people? Because I don't know, when I hear that there are 4 other categories that we don't talk about, or that we're just not discussed on this, totally makes sense. But when I hear that one of those accounts is a hospital, it's like, I think that if my neighbors knew that the hospitals were also past due on their water bill, then maybe they would feel a little bit less strain on themselves for not being able to get through such a very traumatic past year and a half that we've all had to go through. And so I just would like to know what percentage in total of the accounts that are serviced by the Bureau are past due. And just a comment on, I think, some of the later questions, because I'm jumping screen to screen, so give me just a second. A lot of the response in and around how much is the water bill going to be if all of the customers assume the debt, and we are like, hey, we all took the hit together collectively. We're all going to have to pay $10 more on our water bill, like as an option essentially. And I was wondering, or I just wanted to comment that all of the responses within the pub response was just, we don't know these numbers until it actually hits. And so I just wanted to, I don't know, it just very much felt like a whole bunch of fear without a lot of concrete ability to say this is what it could be. And I felt like the Bureau could kind of play with it, or not play with us, but like play with those numbers and kind of suss out like, hey, if no one paid their water bill back, what would it look like as a rate increase? Like that feels like something that should be attainable, or at least like we can kind of try to give you just like shout out a number that they think it would be close to. But it just felt like a lot of the response to what are we going to do, like either you can increase rates, you can reduce your budget, or you can recover debt through customers. So I think it's like question 12 through like 15 or something. All of those are very much saying we don't know what's going to be impacted until it happens. And so it felt very much while reading that I was being like, I was like very nervous, like, oh no, we're past due, but I can't get any of these concrete numbers about like, what is it going to look like if everyone defaults and we as a city just have to come together and pay more? What's it going to look like in these worst case scenarios that the Bureau is selling us, but not selling us the intricacies of what's actually happening? Yeah, I don't know how to make that more concise. All right, thanks.
Cecilia, I noticed your hand was raised. Did you want to respond to either of those questions?
Yes, this is Cecilia Yoon at the Water Bureau. Your question about the number of accounts that are past due out of the total account the Water Bureau service, on the graph that we provided, so if you look at single family, there's 12,887 accounts or so. That basically represents about 8% of the single family accounts that we service. So we included that information, you may not have noticed it. For multifamily, for about 4.7% of multifamily accounts are past due. And then for the commercial, about 4% of the accounts are past due. So that little number below the number of accounts is the information I believe you're asking about. Just wanted to provide that.
Yes, I do see that now. Thank you.
Thanks, Cecilia. Amy Chomowitz, and then I'm thinking I want to make a suggestion for folks.
Thanks. I'm Amy Chomowitz. I am an ex officio member from BES. And my comment is that I certainly recognize the need for the bureaus to recover the debt that is owed. We need those funds for operating the utilities. I think that the plan that the Water Bureau has for communication is a good one, because it is good that people understand that they owe, they're past due and what they owe. It's a good reminder for them. But in terms of collecting the debt, I'd really like to see it done in ways that doesn't unduly harm our residents. I remain concerned about the potential impact to residents and the potential to increase the number of people who are living unsheltered in Portland. And I encourage the Water Bureau and BES to work very closely together to identify strategies and actions for financial assistance, and really pursue every and all strategies that are out there, are maybe examples from other utilities, other jurisdictions, whatever. I understand that customers are required to repay their debt within 1 year. If that's the case, that seems pretty fast. And so if it's possible to attenuate the time that customers can repay their debt, I think that that would also be very helpful. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for great questions. Sorry, Karen Williams speaking. Great questions and recommendations. So what do you all think about this? What if we, and Eliza, I'm asking you this as well, because I'm going to ask for your help on something. Could we compile what we heard today, because there were definitely some very clear recommendations that I heard anyway. Could we put that down on paper? Maybe ask Eliza to do a, it doesn't have to have a title, but put it down on, on paper, kind of listening to the recording, and bring that back to us for a look at November 18th meeting, or perhaps December meeting when it fits in. And we could consider then taking those recommendations. We could either turn that into a letter by itself. We could include that in one of our budget letters that we're going to be sending come early 2022. There's different forms that sort of a list of recommendations could take. But I'm thinking that's one way that we might be able to sort of collect all these great thoughts and ideas and kind of make them actionable. So how do people feel about that? Teresa?
Sorry for being slow on this matter. I also just wanted to suggest something. I feel like everyone had really great inputs. And I was given that in our previous meetings, the Water Bureau staff did express that there are certain numbers of people who are maybe not necessarily in financial challenges, but are just not paying the bills whatsoever. I was wondering if there is any ways to identify, who are really the people who are in, serious deep trouble and who are just paying and are like on the line of being houseless and unsheltered, and who are really like, are there and who's like, just not paying for the sake of not paying. Like, are there any demographic or survey or, whatsoever ways that we can sort of filter out those and collect in some way try to collect debt from those people and not pose any impact on those who really need help, because it seems like we're in a really delicate and difficult balance here, but there is also the need of not going into default. So yeah, this might not sound appealing to everyone, but just an idea.
Thank you, Teresa. And it looks like Carol Cushman might have a public comment she'd like to make.
Thank you. I actually sent a message to Amy, and she suggested I raise my hand and share it. First thing I need to say is, although it says League of Women Voters after my name, and that is why I'm attending here, I'm just saying this as an ordinary citizen. This is not at all to be reflected on the organization. Every year, I get requests with my electric bill and my natural gas bill to help those who cannot afford to pay their bills. And I really haven't paid that close attention to how those programs are set up. But I don't think I have ever gotten a request with my bill from the city for my water sewer services to suggest that I might be willing to put in a few extra dollars to help pay the bills of someone else that can't afford it. And I was just wondering if that was something that might be worth looking at. There are those of us that feel very fortunate with how circumstances have treated us in the last year and a half, and would be willing to toss in, certainly not paying the millions of dollars, but if a number of us tossed in some dollars it might make a difference.
Thank you for that suggestion, Carol. And Robin?
Yeah, thank you again. Sorry, maybe I'll say next round. But I did just want to, I don't know, I wanted to not necessarily rebuke what my colleagues have said, but I did want the just pub in general to be mindful of who has sold us the narrative that people who are past due are just not paying their bills because they just don't care. And so far it hasn't been the people in my neighborhood who are telling me that they're not paying their bills because they can't afford it. It's absolutely been within the Bureau who have come and told us before, hey, I don't know, we've had Bureau reps in meetings like this tell us none of the people that they know have been impacted by the pandemic financially. And then they'll go on to a conversation about how there are people who are just freeloading the system. And so I just want us as members of the community and representatives of those communities to be mindful that if between 5 and 8% of total accounts are past due, that's less than 10%. Every single system that we exist in is going to have a few freeloaders, and that's not to say that we should not challenge that existence essentially, but it's to say that if only a small percentage of total accounts are past due, then maybe we should be more inclined to believe that these people are past due because they're existing through a global pandemic and a second recession in a decade, rather than asking, how do we suss out the people who are not paying their bills versus the ones who really care to? Because I've been in a house where we had to decide between rent and the utility, and I didn't live with electricity that summer. And so it's just being mindful of who has given us that narrative that there are freeloaders that we need to focus on them paying their fair share versus the recognition that we've all lived through a very traumatic year and a half. And some of us have been blessed to not have financial insecurity. I have not been blessed for that. And I always want to make sure that I'm speaking up in favor of the people, that the majority of people are really just struggling, and that we're not trying to come at it from the lens of like, who are the 5 people out of these 20,000 people who are freeloading? And that, yeah.
Thanks, Robin. I'll go to Kale and then Tom. And then I'd really like to ask the body for where you want to go next with this. Do we let the record speak for itself, just the minutes of our discussion here and the recording? Do we leave it there? Do you want to move on at some point? Not today necessarily, but do you want to move on to some point to some kind of a formal recommendation to the Bureau? And let's see, I'm sorry, I said Kale, right? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Eliza. So just to piggyback off of what Robin said, I get extremely hurt when we go by that perspective that the people that I know isn't doing well. The people that I know, hundreds of people that I interact with and serve, are struggling to pay their water bills. And so, if anything, I think we should always take the perspective that people will need help and people use the programs correctly. As many of you, some of you may know, I work for the Department of Human Services Self-Sufficiency Programs for the past 15 and a half years. And one thing we do is determine eligibility for public assistance benefits, cash, food stamps. And throughout the time, I hear so often that people are taking advantage of the system, people are misusing the system, people are just being lazy, all that. And it couldn't be much further from the truth. Okay, the fact is, people use these programs because they're eligible for it and because they're needed. And yes, there are going to be those that are going to misuse the programs, but we cannot develop program and policy based on the minority of the people that are going to misuse the programs. You know, if we reach out to 80% of the people and 20 people misuse it, fine. We reached out to 80% of the people. So I want us to kind of go, as we do the work and figure this out, go from that perspective that the majority of the people need help, and not, and remember, keep that in the back of our head as we develop policy. And I would certainly recommend that we move forward, and recommend that some sort of framework be developed to determine who should get aid and who should not, prioritizing our most vulnerable. So I definitely think we should seek some sort of framework and some sort of program work sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Cale. Tom Lipton, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to, first of all, I want to say I thought that was a good idea that Carol mentioned. And I also want to say, Karen, I think you have a good idea. I would think that as a result of our discussion, that we can put together some ideas or well, whatever we end up putting together. But we've had our questions, and now to offer concrete ways that we suggest that the Bureau might proceed, if in any difference from what they are proposing to proceed. But I want to go back to something, and I'm looking at the different things that the bureaus do. And so, for instance, the financial assistance, the ARC program, which if any of you members have not participated in that, I really encourage you to sign up for at least one. So I've only done one. And there were 2 customers who were there, and they were asking for waivers of a lot of money. This one asked for $10,000 to be waived from this person's bill. And it was not, everybody agreed that it did not make sense to do that. And so that was denied. But the other customer had a bill of, I think, $12,000 or $14,000. And in the discussion, it was very complicated, a can of worms, every couple cans of worms. And it turned out that the Water Bureau person, and we all agreed, cut about $3,000 or $4,000 off that person's bill. So these things, besides assistance or besides looking at extenuating circumstances, this does happen. And I think what I'm trying to get at is that it appears that, and I think it was in the document that questions and answers, that the Water Bureau felt that it couldn't give too much assistance or it would be beyond its authority. And I just have a feeling that what seems to me to be something I feel is perhaps not the Water Bureau's strongest point, is this idea of trying to reach out, like Teresa was saying, well, can they tell us how much this, how many people are this or that? Well, it appears they can't, but they can't relative to how they're structured. But what if they said, okay, we need another staff person to work on this issue in a way that we can really try to make sure that we don't turn people off that shouldn't be turned off, and that we do find the people who are trying to play the system and get away with not paying what they really could pay and stuff like that. So does the Water Bureau need more staff because of that? And if that's the case, then that to me would be one of those things that we might put on our suggestions, or whatever we do put together to if we put something together to give to the Water Bureau, that if they need more staff to do this, to me, I think that would be an important activity, because I don't know how many Judys there are out there. And I know there, of the 12,887, I can't believe that all of those are trying to game the system. And so how many, is there 500 Judys or whatever it might be? So anyway, so whatever we can think of to help to help the Water Bureau be able to be more thorough, that they don't hurt people. And I think that's, for me, the bottom line is, if they need to be more thorough, let's give them the support and resources, or at least support those resources as a recommendation to council. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We'll go to Amy Chalmowitz next. This is Karen Williams speaking. And then I'm going to ask you all to take a quick straw poll. Amy?
Thanks, Amy Chomowitz, ex officio. And just very quickly, I really liked, Karen, your suggestion. And I know I'm not a voting member, but if I could add to it, that in addition to ideas that have been raised at the formal meeting, that pub members could also just simply email ideas to Amy Archer Masters and Eliza. I think that would be helpful. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Amy. Okay, let's do a quick, just a raise hands, quick straw poll. This is not a formal vote, but how many folks would like to ask our amazing Eliza to compile some of what has been said today into a draft recommendation list? How many folks would like to move that direction? Eliza, you don't get to vote, but please let me know if that's a reasonable ask.
That is, I think, well, I think Robin's emoji, I never understand emojis. I think Robin might be laughing because I don't get to vote. I'm not sure. You can tell me if I read that right. Yeah, that sounds like it's totally reasonable. The timing, we got a lot of moving parts, but I think the timing in the next couple of weeks is reasonable. And I think we could add on to that. I'll send out an email tomorrow, but if anybody has further thoughts or recommendations that you want to make, email, I'll give you a due date in the email tomorrow. Sorry, I'm stuttering this evening. And that draft of recommendations, you're going to see some internal inconsistencies and conflicts, and I may suggest some bridging where we see it, and you can accept and reject and amend wholesale as you wish.
Wonderful, thank you. That looks great. Thanks everybody for your support on that. I do want to just acknowledge that I was scribbling away here, but I heard at least 3 questions for more information. And I just want to acknowledge those are obviously in the recording, and we'll ask Eliza to reach out to Bureau leadership and staff and try and get a little bit more information on some of those questions. Okay, good to move on. Any objections to moving on, moving the agenda? Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everyone. So our next order of business is a decision, and this is a decision that is time sensitive that we need to make today. And that is the letter of support, draft letter of support that was sent in your read ahead materials. So yes, any suggested changes to that that anyone would like to make? Do we want to formally vote to send that letter of support to City Council? And then third decision is, do we want to ask for, essentially give permission to at least one volunteer who in their schedule was able to attend the November 17th City Council meeting and deliver a couple of talking points from that letter. So 3 decisions. First of all, any changes that anyone would like to make to the letter? Okay. Second decision is, would anyone, and a motion would be in order if anyone
Wait.
would.
Oh, hey, this is Tom. I'm sorry. I couldn't find the right buttons. I was trying to find the letter so I could find my comment.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I should have
Okay.
paused a little more to give you time to look at the letter.
No, that's okay. I can't find how to get it on my screen, but what I recall was in the request, it says something about the word anticipated is included. Oh, there it is. Okay, so it's Okay, so down in the second paragraph toward the bottom it says Pub further recommends council consider $1.5 million as a minimum and be willing to allocate additional funds based on grant committee's recommendations affected community. I wasn't comfortable with that last sentence to ask the city council to consider at this time, 3 years in advance. I think we should just drop that sentence and just leave it at what we've made. That's my, so that recommending on that. And then the other word that bothered me was, I think right above that, it talked about the anticipated budget. Well, maybe it's not in this sentence here. I think it was there, one for grants and other public involvement activities to support meaningful participation through the remedy design phase. Okay, no, I guess it's not in this this particular document. I think there's 2 documents, but anyway, so that that sentence is what I would recommend. And then there was some reference to this $5,000, and it says, okay, allows individual grants to exceed $5,000, and I'm fine with that. But is there a maximum?
The reason, this is Eliza, the
No,
reason
I know
that's,
why it's there. It's explained why it's there because of some kind of procedural thing. But still, do we want to suggest a maximum cap on it? Or if somebody came in and wanted $1 million, would that be okay? So I mean, do we have a range of what we're, not necessarily we, but the Bureau's program? Anyway, I just found that sort of vague and possibly hard for applicants to apply for, because somebody's going to say to them, yes, you can apply for up to 100,000 or something, but should we just go ahead and put it in here, or leave that at the discretion of the people who are administering this? That's it.
Okay, thanks, Tom, for those 2 points. I would like to respond to the first point about that last sentence, just as a additional context. That sentence is basically a rewording of the motion that we made at the September 16th meeting. And that was to reflect that, and I am forgetting, so forgive me, but whether it was one of the grant committee members, or if it was actually one of the members of the City African American Network who was speaking on this topic. In any case, there was a recommendation that things like inflation, cost of living increases, some kind of, no one used the word indexing, but just recognizing that, $500,000 today isn't going to buy what, or 3 years from now isn't going to buy what $500,000 would buy today. So part of the ask from the grant committee was that uncertainty be acknowledged, and that there be some mechanism for at least entertaining that. The grant committee, who are indeed the experts on this, may at some point come back with a recommendation for more money than the $1,500, excuse me, $1.5 million. So that's just as a matter of context where that came from, Tom. To your other question about putting a maximum on, I don't. Anyway, I guess I'll just state that my personal opinion would be that would not be our place to suggest that. I think the program is run by the experts in the Bureau, as well as the grant committee recommendations, of course. So that would be my suggestion, is that we don't include a maximum.
And I would add also, for clarification on that initial sentence in that paragraph that Karen just spoke to, that's the language from the ordinance. So it's trying to mirror what the ordinance ask is. And so the ordinance And they do actually in their grant program have a minimum and max that they're actually doing, as Karen said, but we're just mirroring the ordinance language in that first sentence.
Okay, again, thanks for those suggestions, Tom. Are there any other suggestions for rewording, for adding, for deleting to this letter? Okay. Trying to give people enough time to hit their unmute button. Okay, well, with that, then what I'd like to ask folks is, what do people think about taking away that highlighted sentence? And more or less, can people live with that? Do we want to reword? Do we want to just, out of simplicity, just cut it out? Because again, it was in our motion that the pub made. How would people like to proceed with that? Kale.
Hey there, to me, this language, I would like to see a little more restriction, because I think this language opens it up to more than 1.5 million. I mean, when you put a language that says to be 1.5 million as a minimum and be willing to allocate additional fund based on grant committee recommendations, I think I would be more inclined to put a maximum language that indicates a cap on the spending rather than something that allows for more spending. I just think when we give room to spend more, that leaves us an opportunity to overspend and mismanage.
Thanks, Bill. Can I make this is Karen Williams. May I make a suggestion? What if that final sentence simply said, as PUB recommended in its September 16th motion in support of the grant committee, PUB recommends that the council consider grant committee input and potentially changing economic conditions, or I don't know, something that Eliza could probably word beautifully, but just a more general statement of that we still recommend that the council essentially confer and take input from the grant committee on what the grant committee believes they need to do their work. Kale, is that another hand raised? Please go ahead.
Yes, might I also suggest if we want to keep this language, to include a so keeping that language by adding a sentence that says something like without exceeding a certain amount, without prior approval, board approval, or whatever. But yeah, indicating like spend a minimum of this amount, but do not exceed it. Next amount, or if the planned budget is to spend the 1.5 million, we can indicate a lower number, saying a minimum of $1 million. If we can be more specific, and so not to exceed the 1.5 million approved.
So this is Karen speaking, Williams. I'm getting sort of the feeling that we're making this a little too complicated. So I am going to propose that we just delete that last sentence. And like I said, our our support for including the grant committee in the future is already in our motion of support from September 16th. So my proposal actually is that we just delete that last sentence since it's making folks uncomfortable. Tom, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention two things. One is, as you had mentioned, that this was in our previous action that we took. I don't remember this being in that action, and if I did, I would have said the same thing that I'm saying now. But I do agree with you agreeing with me to take it out, and I hope others do too. And I think another thing is, I've noticed being on the committee that it seems sometimes we put a lot of words into our letters, and I think we could be more concise, because basically we agree with this and we approve of the $1.5 million for the grants. I don't know that we need to say a lot more than that. And so so I would actually look at the next paragraph and maybe even take that off altogether as well, but I'll just leave it at this particular sentence. And so that's the other thing. I don't know about the rest of you, and I don't know, I just feel kind of totally in the dark about this. I don't know what these grants are really funding. I mean, I have a list that Eliza sent me of what the names of the grants are, the grantees, but I don't know exactly what they're doing. And I feel that I don't know enough, and I would really like to know more about what have they done, what have grantees done in the past, if there's been any. I don't even know if there's been people that got a grant before. And so anyway, I just feel like I'm just not very well informed about this particular issue.
Okay, thanks for that, Tom. I'll go to Sarah. And Alex has something to say too, but I do want to say, Tom, my memory is that maybe that you were not able to attend the September 16th meeting, because we did have a presentation on from the grant committee, and we actually heard from the grant committee themselves, community members, not just the folks at the Bureau that work on this, the Portland Harbor.
Oh, you're right. I had to go to the doctor. That's right. I missed.
So I just would, and this is, I just would encourage you to maybe take a look back, because I'm pretty sure the presentation will still be posted. And there's quite a bit of information in the presentation that the grant committee gave to us. It doesn't replace the actual words that we heard from the grant committee and their experience, but it's a pretty good overview.
Okay, thank you. That's right.
You're welcome. Sarah, please go ahead.
Yeah, hey everyone, this is Sarah Messier, Portland Water Bureau ex officio. So the comment about sort of the cost of living adjustment or inflation came from me. I am a grant program manager for lead education, and provide grants to community members. And so when the Portland Harbor Grant Committee came to this meeting, has a sort of similar setup to my grant program. So that's why I wanted to provide that context of, I haven't had really much luck with getting more funding for my community partners that do excellent work with low income communities, with multilingual communities. And that's what it sounded like the Portland Harbor Grant Committee here is really trying to fund community groups to do that same work. So that's why I recommended including some sort of language to at least keep up with inflation, so that these community groups who are representing, communities of color, multilingual communities, all these marginalized communities, that we sufficiently fund their work and sufficiently fund their efforts and their time in doing this work for the city.
Sarah, do you have a suggested replacement sentence that's more specific to inflation that you'd like to offer?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm also struggling with this too, because I definitely hear everyone's, you know, concerns. We of, you know, we don't want to write a blank check, and I totally understand that. I have to sit and think with it. I have a harder time like just coming up with ideas on the fly, but I can think about it.
Okay, time, thank you. Time is of the essence.
Alex,
Karen, this is Amy, and I'm wondering if it could be as simple, if the board is interested in at least reflecting inflation, since you have a sentence about allows individual grants to exceed $5,000, that you could just add on to the end of that and allows for inflation increases or something like that.
Let's go ahead and type that in and let people stare at it for a minute and see if that's.
Alex,
it's
also,
okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Alex had his hand up and I lost track. Please go ahead, Alex.
I had actually raised it and then lowered it. I just wanted to, well, first of all, just to preface any discussion of this grant with my disclaimer that I work for an organization that actually has received one of those grants. But I did want to just give, if it's not a conflict of interest, and I don't think it is, but I just wanted to give a little bit of information about, in response to Tom's question about what exactly the type of work is that's funded by these grants, and just to kind of break it down really simply, some of the efforts include doing things like helping community members to understand plans that are put out by the city or state for the cleanup of certain areas, paying for essentially staff time to do outreach, to do kind of educational events, and then actually allowing, facilitating the community's ability to respond to public comment periods and to provide comments back to DEQ or EPA or whoever the agency or polluter is about the cleanup that's happening. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there as an example of the types of things that this funding goes towards.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex, for that additional information. Right, all right, so we have a proposed much shorter, much more concise way to refer to inflation as an eventuality that we would like to be considered, or we would like the city council to consider. Can we live with that? Does anyone strongly object? Does anyone object to including that? Okay.
I think we might want to wordsmith it a little bit. I think there's a preposition missing, but I'm
Yeah,
not.
right now. It is a little awkward, but yes, I can live with it. Okay, so with that, we now have a letter presented before us. Again, time is of the essence because the city council is going to be hearing from the grant committee on November 17th. So this is our last opportunity to make a decision about submitting this letter of support. So with that, would anyone care to move that we forward this letter of support to city council?
I will so move that we forward the letter with the recommended changes to city council.
Okay, thank you. Karen Spencer, is there a second?
Second. Gabby. Voting
Gabriella, second. Thank you very much, Gabriella. Is there any public comment? Seeing and hearing no public comment. Question is called and Karen Williams votes yes.
This is Kaliska Day, voting member. I vote yes.
This is Cale Turn, voting member. I vote yes.
Robin Castro, voting member. I vote yes.
Teresa Huang, voting member. I vote yes.
Alex Lopez, voting member. I abstain from this vote.
Tom Lipton, voting member. I vote yes.
Gabriela Saldana, voting yes.
Karen Spencer, voting member. I vote yes.
Thank you, everyone. And I I forgot about the other element that we need to decide on, and that is sending one person to be a spokesperson and deliver a short version of this letter at the city council meeting. Would anyone like to make a motion to give that, to make that so? Or perhaps I should ask a slightly different way. Are there any volunteers who would be willing to go to city council and deliver a couple quick talking points from this letter on November 17th at approximately 3:30 p.m. or later?
And this is Amy. The option could be that you just read the letter itself.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. No creative speech making required. Okay. Well, I would be willing. This is Karen Williams speaking. So you have a volunteer.
This is Robin. Not sure that I can volunteer, but let me just remind the crowd that we are missing about half of our pub members. And so there's a total possibility that someone who's just not here would also be inclined to want to do this as well.
Sure. So really the decision for us today, the pub members that are here, is just will we sanction one of us who is available and wishes to go and deliver, again, talking points from, or just read the letter to City Council on November 17th. That's the decision I'm looking for from the group.
So Karen, are you looking for a motion? Like if I were to motion that we send someone from pub who is interested to city council to speak on our behalf. Is that the motion you're looking for?
That's it. That's golden.
Okay.
Thank you,
So
Kaliska.
I will motion that.
Fantastic.
Right.
Is there a
This is
second?
Tom, I'll second it.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any public comments on that? All right. Karen Williams, voting member. I vote yes.
Kaliska Day, voting member. I vote yes.
Cale Turn, voting member. I vote yes.
Robin Castro, voting member. I vote yes.
Teresa Huang, voting member. I vote yes.
Alex Lopez, voting member, and I abstain.
Tom Lipton, I vote yes.
Gabriela Saldana, voting yes.
Oh, my apologies if I forgot to hit that unmute button. Karen Spencer, voting member. I vote yes.
Thank you, everyone. Motion passes. Thanks very much. All right, our last order of business, and thank you to Cale and Robin. I know you two both had items you wanted to discuss at our meeting today, and thank you for allowing us to move those to November 18th. So our last item of business today, it's another decision, folks, is this work session that we have been kind of noodling over and talking about for a few weeks now. we really need to decide if this is something that we want to invest time in, or right now, if now is the right time, or perhaps now isn't the right time. And we have an option that I'd like to, excuse me, we always have options, right? But I'd like to have you think about another option that might accomplish some of the goals that we would otherwise accomplish with a council work session, and it might be actually a little bit more direct. So we had about 3 people, I believe, who said that they, had some reservations about the time commitment involved in, crafting a presentation to City Council and participating in the work session, but thought that it was important and would either, throw themselves in or offer to support those that wanted to go. So that's kind of where we left the conversation. But there were, I think, significant reservations among many other pub members who said, wow, we've got so much going on right now. This just feels like too much. So another option to think about is hearing some really good feedback from the meeting that we had with Commissioner Mapps a few weeks ago. What we could do is, in lieu of a City Council work session, essentially have not exactly a work session, but a working meeting with Commissioner Mapps. It sounds like his office is open and interested in something like that. And, that might be a better fit for where we are in terms of new board members, new commissioners, and just, the busyness of pub and the busyness of City Council that has a lot on their plate right now as well. So any reactions to that? Would anyone like to speak up? Yes, we should do a work session. Yes, we should do a Commissioner Mapps meeting. No, we shouldn't do either. Any thoughts on that? Teresa.
Actually, Tom raised his hand before me, so I should let Tom go first.
Oh, you go ahead and go, Teresa.
Okay. I just wanted to express that I feel like I would like to support a working meeting with Commissioner Mapps. I'm not sure about the rest of the board members, but I do appreciate that last time he did come into one of our board meetings to basically solicit our input. And I feel like that was a really positive interaction that the board have with the commissioner. And of course, the questions can always need some work, but I feel like this would be another opportunity to have a more efficient interaction with Commissioner Mapps than one of the council work sessions. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. Tom.
Yeah, I like the idea of meeting with Commissioner Mapps. I also was thinking about an issue that, that we would, whoever we meet with, we want to have some issue and or issues that we've put together or whatever. But what struck me is that most of us, I think, on the board currently were not involved in the decisions made about the Water Bureau filtration plant. And I was looking at a letter that the previous board, or the board back in November 2020 or 2019, sent and asked for biannual reports from the Water Bureau about costs and things like that. Anyway, what I'm getting at is that I know there are city council members besides Commissioner Mapps that are new. And I wonder how much all of us know. And I just think perhaps that particular issue, because it's like most other big giant projects, it's probably going to go over budget, and it went over budget before, and then there's lots of discussion. It could be that they're struggling with issues of how much it's going to cost right now, and what are they going to do, and what are the designs, all kinds of things. And it might be good, maybe the Water Bureau would appreciate an opportunity to kind of put the cards out on the table where they are today and what's happening. And if they need any input from council or the pub, then perhaps we could, figure that out. But anyway, so that to me, I would go for either one, a meeting with MAPS or a meeting with city council, and especially with the idea of helping ourselves, those of us who were not part of the original vote, and city council members who were not part of the original discussions, to really come up to speed on where we're at, and are there potentially any problems on the horizon that we need to kind of be aware of and help with. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
Okay, thanks, Tom. And I should have said as well that while it has been typical, I guess, for PUB to have a work session with city council in sort of the winter, November, December. There's nothing that says it has to be then. That has worked out okay from the standpoint that it's kind of before budget season and and after the fall, and it's a relatively quieter time, I guess. Not the case this year. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't request a work session later in the spring. I mean, it's a little odd maybe to do it at the end of our working year, but it could almost be foreshadowing, work and recommendations for, the next, as we're putting together a work plan for the next year. So if we decide not to do it now, doesn't mean we could never do a work session. It just means we're not going to do it next month, basically. Okay, let's see, other thoughts, folks that had expressed an interest in, Julie, I know wasn't here today. Robin, Tom, you just had a chance to speak. Robin, what are your thoughts? You had been interested in perhaps doing a council work session. What are your thoughts about doing a meeting with Commissioner MAPS instead?
I was leaning a little bit more towards the council work session, but I do see that as the fact that Commissioner MAPS is the Utility Bureau's commissioner, that it's important that we're always really connected with him. But I, as someone who's been on the board for about 11 months now, I'm not necessarily sure how often we have council work sessions. And to me, to my understanding of the board is that it is our job to speak with Commissioner MAPS, but it is also our job to be community representatives to the city council as well, and not just directly through not just directly through Commissioner MAPS. And so I would say that I do have interest in that council work session. And I hope that we're having them frequently enough that I get to be part of a couple, because I think that is, there's a lot of power in the capacity to be in that room with the other commissioners. And so definitely we'll go with everyone else's advice as well, depending on if we really have the specific interests, like what are we going to go into that session working with. But just as my own personal preference, it seems like the council work session is one of those pillars of power that we have as PUB members, and that we should do what we can to interact with city council directly as often as we can.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Robin. Let's see, Alex, and then Karen Spencer.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to echo Robin's comments just now. I am okay with a working meeting with Commissioner MAPS. I think that's if that's the decision, I'm actually fine with that. But I also think that it would be good to take advantage of the opportunity for a full council work session. So I think that's where my preference lies.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with Robin and Alexander. Essentially, what I believe is that they're two different purposes. The working meeting with Commissioner Mabs, he laid out several priorities that I'd love to have more detail on, and I think a working meeting with him on that would be important. I think that for the council, we have a number of initiatives, particularly as we're trying to get into that post-pandemic phase. And I think that would be a good opportunity to speak with the council about what our issues and concerns are. Water filtration is certainly one of them, but there are more than that. So I believe that it should be both.
The both and option. Okay. All right, well, let's see. Let me turn to Eliza for a moment, or Amy. Whoever.
Yeah, this is
Give us some help with timing.
I've got an idea.
Okay.
So my first question was, is everybody who was saying, I think a council work session important, were you actually volunteering if it could fit in your schedule? Would be a question. So I think that goes to Tom, Robin, Alex, and Karen, Spencer, and Julia. So you can do a thumbs up if you were actually volunteering to participate in the work session in some way. Yay. And great. And so, yay. So then my next thought was, we probably need to confer with Commissioner Mapps and the mayor's office about the timing for that work session, because it is going to be tricky this year, because there's a technical detail that a budgetary fact, which is that the fall bump has been delayed by several weeks, and council is going to go straight from that into main budget season. And we're usually trying to stay ahead of that and have your work session before main budget season. And so that's going to be some delicate timing. But what I'm hearing from you all might make sense is to sort of write a memo that says something along the lines of, we're interested in a working meeting with Commissioner Mapps. We'd like to speak with council and have a work session with council in the next, I'm going to make it up completely, you all, but we can return to November 18th, in the next 9 months, right? To be scheduled around a time that works with council's and board members' needs. And the memo could say something like that. And so you've actually put in the memo your intent to have a work session in a suggested time frame for the mayor and the commissioner in charge, Commissioner Mapps, to review and say, yeah, 9 months sounds like a reasonable time frame to us too.
Okay, we have a proposal. What I heard in the proposal was Eliza putting together a memo on our behalf, requesting a work session in a time frame of some months. And would anyone like to, we do need to vote on that formally. So would anyone like to make a motion?
And I'll add, I'm sorry, Karen, I'm stuttering at the end of the day. I'll add that we can actually, if we know that's if you all approve of that general direction, Amy and I can talk with our liaisons in Commissioner Mapps' office so that we can bring back a kind of negotiated time frame for the board to consider at your November 18th meeting. So we could bring back like the draft memo for you at that meeting. That we've already had a brief conversation with them saying, this is the direction the board is going. How do you feel about it? Does that seem like, what time frame seems reasonable to you? And then you all could give feedback on that too.
Okay, so did I hear, Eliza, that the memo would come back to the board on November 18th for a final thumbs up on, yes, that's the memo we want to send?
Yeah, that accurately reflects, it seems like a reasonable time frame to you, seems doable, accurately reflects what you all, the direction you're heading.
Okay, so the decision that we would make today is just that, yes, we do want to ask for a council work session
In probably some longer time frame than the next 2 months.
in some longer time frame than the next 2 months.
And,
Okay,
and it would be useful to know from the board if you are actually interested in pursuing a longer conversation with Commissioner Maps, a quote working meeting, like on some identified priority areas for this budget as well.
what I heard was, I'm not hearing there's any reason that we can't do the both and option.
Yes, and that's what I was asking is kind of, are people interested in the both and option?
Okay.
Yeah, I think I heard from at least 4 or 5 voting members interest in the Commissioner Maps meeting as well.
Because yes, and so then we draft that into the memo. So the memo would be the both and option.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to move that we do that. This is Tom, voting member.
We have a motion from Tom Lipton for both and a memo that says, yes, we'd like a work session in the next few months. And we are also interested in engaging with Commissioner Maps for a working session as time allows.
I will second the motion.
Wonderful. Second from Karen Spencer. Any public comment? Calling the question, Karen Williams votes yes.
Liz G'day, voting member votes yes.
Turn voting member, I vote yes.
Robin Castro, voting member, I vote yes.
Teresa Huang, voting member, I vote yes.
Alex Lopez, voting member, I vote yes.
Tom Lipton, voting member, I vote yes.
Gabriela Saldana Lopez, voting member, voting yes.
Karen Spencer, voting member, I'll vote yes.
Right, terrific. Motion passes. Thanks to everybody. Let's take a quick look at what November 18th looks like for our next meeting. Oh, actually, Eliza, let's go back to the between meeting communication, and just I'd like to flag that for folks because we might be able to get a quick decision on this. Let's see. I want to be expedient about this. Robin, would you like to, I don't want to put you on the spot, but would you like to, I believe this was your idea and I just want to give credit there. Would you like to speak to this idea of sharing contact information so we could talk with each other in between meetings, one-on-one?
Yeah, of course, of course. So just in my 11 months on the bureau, or on the board, I'm already on the bureau, on the board, I've noticed that I haven't been able to successfully build a camaraderie with any of my fellow members. And I think that it's mostly just COVID and Zoom. But I was kind of pushing on the back end, like why, like how come we're not already connected, and just my own interest of wishing that I had contact information, whether it be just specifically email or phone numbers with other board members. And that way, within that 3-person no deliberation outside of meetings, that we were still able to connect, because I know that we have similarities, we have interests that we want to push, and I feel like we would be more successful as a body if we were able to connect individually with each other. And I just think that the way that the life that we're currently living in, being very remote, has maybe kept us from the ability to connect the way that previous members have not had to face.
I'm
Thanks,
in favor of it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Please.
This is Tom. I was just trying to expedite this. I agree with that, with Robin's proposal.
Okay, great, thanks. So Eliza, this isn't something that we don't need to vote on this. but we are missing, a good number of our folks. So
Yes, I think what I can do, I'll send an email out. If anybody's opposed to a Word document that has your email address and your phone number in it going out to the other board members, please send me an email. I will also send an email to that effect tomorrow, and then say that if I haven't heard from you in a week, then I'm going to go ahead and send out that Word document. So I'll give people a week to tell me that I would not like to have this contact information in there or whatever.
okay, yeah, if people are okay with that, and Elijah, you think that meets, passes muster, so to speak, then let's plan on getting an email and just, give folks a chance who aren't here today to say, heck no, I don't want my phone number out there. I don't want you people calling me. So that's great. So let's take a quick look at November 18th. Before we adjourn, and we're going to couple topics that we're going to carry over. Thank you again to Kale, who wanted to talk about the audit report that was sent in read aheads, and Robin has some ideas on meeting process that are going to require more. We should talk about that more. I don't want to rush those conversations right now, but thanks both of you for letting us carry those over until November 18th. And we will also be hearing from the illustrious Amy Archer-Master, getting us geared up and prepared and turning us into budget hawks. So we're ready for those program offers come January. So any final words of parting from any pub members before we adjourn? All right, well, have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thanks so much. Meeting adjourned, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.